It's a very cool weather out here in Lagos, Nigeria this evening, and well, it's the right way and a very nice way to start Report Desk Africa. And if you're joining us for the very first time, good evening and welcome. My name is Bernard Akede, and yes, this is Report Desk Africa, or as we like to call it, RDA. It's the show where we talk about the major stories that have made it to our bulletins from across the continent of Africa, from the north to the south, east and west, all through the week. Talking about from Sunday up until today, Thursday. Again, my name is Bernard Akede. Usually, I would say I don't do this alone. I have a pretty face by my side. But today, I may need to burst your bubble. I still have somebody by my side, but it's not a pretty face.
Oh, certainly not a pretty face. Good evening, Africa, from Nigeria. How you all feeling today? I am Ni Omoni. I know you're expecting to see the usual face, a feminine voice, and don't worry, I'm just the guest host for today, standing in for Blessings Musugu, and promises to be an exciting episode as usual. You know, Report Desk Africa bring you the best stories across Africa. We want to get you up to date and make sure that you have the best information. Do not go anywhere. Today we're going to be talking about two issues that are very important that affects even you watching us if you're Nigerian, if you're from Zimbabwe, from other African countries, and that is the incessant strikes in African University, and of course the explosion that rocked Mogadishu and soldiers were injured. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Thank you for joining us. Once again, this is Report Desk Africa. I am Bernard, and this is Nii. And, well, Nii, how does it feel to be... well, you've been here before.
Yeah, but not on this side.
Not on this side. On this side of there, exactly, on this side, right? It's an all-boy affair, don't worry.
Right, don't worry.
It's
going to be exciting. There's no need to worry. And we're certainly going to be bringing the heat up and making sure that people get informed as usual.
Yeah. And if Blessings is watching, please note that the boys, what boys can do, girls cannot do better. All right.
Oh, right.
All right. So for today, we're moving straight to the meat of the matter. Thank you for staying with us. Again, this is Report Desk Africa. Our first story is going to take us into the continent, all areas of the continent, but specifically, we're looking at the southern part and the western part of Africa. And we're talking about the incessant strikes in African universities. Nigerian university students may be at home for another 12 weeks as the Academic Staff Union of Universities, popularly known as ASU, say that the already existing 2-month strike will be extended. Now, this comes even as university students in Zimbabwe have disregarded pleas not to go on strike and have started demonstrating the hike in tuition fees. Please watch this report. When we come back, we'll be diving into the story. With the lifting of most COVID-19 restrictions globally, normal academic activities were expected to return to the tertiary education sector that was greatly affected by the pandemic. In sub-Saharan Africa, however, it is not smooth sailing, as some countries may yet wait a while for the tertiary education sector to get on stream. University lecturers in Nigeria have downed tools for a while, effectively shutting the doors of the nation's universities. Now, after 2 months of being on strike, they have announced that their actions will continue for another 12 weeks, as the federal government has refused to meet agreements reached with their union.
In 2009, there was an agreement between our union and the federal government. In that agreement, there are 4 pillars upon which that agreement stood. The first is conditions of service of academic staff in the universities. The second is funding for revitalization of public universities. The third is university autonomy and academic freedom. The fourth is other matters that are related to all of the 4. University lecturers in Nigeria have been receiving the same salary in the last 13 years.
Down south in Zimbabwe, the permanent secretary in the Higher and Tertiary Ministry has pleaded with university students to shun planned demonstrations over fee hikes, saying a reduction of fees will cripple learning institutions. But the aggrieved students say they have had enough. University of Cape Town is currently ranked number 1 in Africa, but 240 in the world. Experts believe the frequent disruptions to their academic calendars and other sundry challenges are why African universities will continue to rate way below others across the world. One of the major indices of development is education, and if African countries seek to achieve the status of being called developed countries, more needs to be done to make education a priority. Bernard Akede, News Central Lagos.
And there you have it, why it seems like the Zimbabwean might be going on the strike based on the increase in tuition fees. Nigerians are actually going on strike for a more complex reason. And joining us to discuss this topic as we try to shed more light is Zimbabwean journalist Marshall Bwaya. You're welcome on the program. Marshall, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic.
Awesome.
Marshall.
Good to have you. We can see you though, but we'll just talk on as you sort your visuals. Just acknowledge if you can hear me, Marshall.
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, awesome.
Good evening, Marshall.
Good evening, Marshall. It's obvious, and this is no more storytelling. It's not the first time they're going on an industrial strike or an industrial action in Zimbabwe, same as Nigeria, and that has raised a lot of concern over the years. And this has been a major challenge. Now, aside insecurity that we know has been affecting a lot of African countries, there is an issue of these unions going on industrial actions. And these has, over the years, hampers people's, especially for students or people that are attending the public university, and it has become an anomaly and raising so many issues. What are your thoughts about this? Do you think industrial action is the only language that can be used or deployed in issues that have to do with getting our education system back to track?
Well, industrial action is not the only solution. In fact, if government were actually taking into cognizance the socio-economic challenges that our students are facing, there won't be need for industrial action. So, in other words, industrial action is when all other platforms or avenues of engagements or dialogue have failed. That's when unions or student unions get into industrial action.
Okay. So much for basically, we're looking at the Nigerian factors and we're looking at those in Zimbabwe also, trying to compare them and other African countries, but looking at these two countries as case studies. Now, in Nigeria, basically, over the years, I'm sure this affected me in my university days, and I'm sure Nia, it clearly has affected you too, or clearly did affect you too. Now, basically, it has to do with remuneration, for the lecturers. Most of them say that different agreements made by the government were not met, salaries not paid, outstandings not paid, bonuses not paid, universities are not functioning well, laboratories are not doing so well. And this has led to several strikes over the years, over decades, over so many years, affecting students, affecting lecturers. In Zimbabwe, is the case the same? I know that this time it was the students, it is the students protesting the hike in tuition fees. But do the lecturers also have anything to do with this? Are they also requesting anything from the government?
Well, lecturers have their own plight here. Lecturers are not properly remunerated. Just that lecturers in Zimbabwe are not really vocal, but they're only vocal in terms of when you see them actually moving out of Zimbabwe, looking for greener pastures in other countries because they are poorly remunerated. But they are not as vocal as students because they don't have unions. And in other ways, they're actually muzzled by the government not to air their grievances. With students, it's a different scope on its own because students are actually have their fees paid by their parents, and most of their parents are civil servants, and civil servants have had their salaries actually eroded. I think by inflation over the past 3 months, they've had their salaries eroded. So it's like the salaries at the end is currently pegged around, ranging from around maybe say 34 1,000 RTGS. Yet in most institutions, fees is charging 2 times or 3 times more than that. So the students have their own plight, the lecturers have their own plight, and those plights, in essence, are actually affecting, actually negatively impacting the whole education system in Zimbabwe.
And is this how would I say, is this a recurring decimal? Like I mentioned earlier, in Nigeria, honestly, from the time when I know that I could speak English and understand English, even before I got into school, lecturers have been going on strike, and we've been having incessant strikes in the country from almost every year, as a matter of fact. But in Zimbabwe, how frequent or how often do you have strikes in the education sector?
Well, we don't have frequent strikes in the educational sector in terms of lecturers. But what happens in Zimbabwe, we have a saying that your salary does not sustain you. What sustains you is your side hustle. So at the end of the day, you have lecturers focusing their efforts on other activities that puts food on the table, because they have to subsidize their salaries, because the salaries cannot sustain them. So we may not have strikes as in Nigeria, but you may have a situation where the standard of education is deteriorating because lecturers are not motivated to teach students in a manner that is actually convincing or that is actually sustainable.
Think that's the point I want to happen. The fact that the standard of education might be deteriorating. Now, there's a school of thought in Nigeria that would say the only thing that strikes more than ASU, which is the Association of the Union of Universities, is thunder. And yeah, maybe as some say it, but the fact remains that in this case, for Zimbabwe, the students are the one calling for something to be done about the increase in tuition fee and for it to be reduced. In Nigeria, on the other hand, the lecturers are the one calling for a reform. The similarities, however, is what I'm trying to understand. Are the lecturers also in on this process with the students in Zimbabwe?
Well, I cannot say the lecturers are in. Well, they might be in. There is no evidence that actually hints or identifies that the lecturer is actually involved. It's actually student action, because students know where they are coming from. They understand the background that they're coming from. They understand where we're coming from. Their parents are not earning much, or they are having these challenges, financial challenges. So it's more or less they are actually demonstrating from what they relate when they come back, when they're coming from home and going to school. They understand the situation at home and understand the situation at school, how much they need to survive at school. So the students, I would say, they're acting out of their own because they understand their own challenges. I can't say that lecturers are actually involved in this situation. There's no evidence that implicates lecturers are involved in these strikes.
So if we're talking about standard, I intentionally asked that, okay? So if we're talking about the standard of education now, if the lecturers who are supposed to be teaching the students are not really affected or really involved, and it's the students who are receiving, let's take it like that, that's how education works, right? The teachers impact the knowledge, are the one who are going, then would it be safe to say that the reduction in tuition fee is actually affecting the quality of education? Because the people giving out the education, the lecturers who are giving out this knowledge, seem to be okay.
No, I'm not saying the lecturers are okay. As I said before, that our salaries or the local currency is currently facing what we call high inflation.
Yeah.
The lecturers that have had their salaries actually being eroded over the past months, over the years, actually over the recent years, actually. So lecturers are actually affected because lecturers, at the end of the day, they've got families that they need to feed. They've got relatives that they need to take care of. They've got bills that they need to pay. So in a way, they have their own challenges. And those challenges, they may be subtle. They may not be actually being disseminated out in the public domain, unlike students. But when lecturers are affected, if they are not properly remunerated, simply saying they're not motivated to give quality education. They may be present in institutions, but maybe their efforts actually focus on other issues other than teaching. So that actually affects the quality of education in Zimbabwe.
Okay, Marshall, I'll ask a more personal question. Did you experience any strikes in your days in school?
Well, in my days in school, we did not experience strike because when I did my degree, it was during an era called the GNU. Things were a bit stable. There were really no challenges with that. Teachers or civil servants were properly paid. They had enough salaries, so we didn't face certain challenges. So currently, it's a different ballgame on its own. Times have changed with the local currency. Inflation is at place. A lot of civil servants are poorly paid. They're always crying about their salaries, and the government hasn't been really responsive into their plight.
Do you have any idea how long this may last? In Nigeria here, sadly, it's looking like, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, at least for now. Like I said earlier in the introduction, this strike has already lasted 2 weeks, and now the lecturers are saying they're going to push it for another, 2 months, I beg your pardon. And now they say they're going to push it for another 12 weeks. So it does look really, the result looks far-fetched, unless hopefully something happens soon. But in Zimbabwe, is there has there been any, will I say, agreement reached between the government and the students? Is anything seeming likely to change anytime soon?
Well, it's a bit difficult to actually estimate when this impasse will end. But currently, there hasn't been. What I understand from my research as a journalist is that students have actually written to government, airing out their grievances, saying that they want the fuel hike to go down, they want the fees to be slashed. So government, from what I understand, has not yet responded. So it's a matter of how government will respond to this matter. Are they going to quickly respond? Are they going to respond at all? So at the end of the day, I cannot really estimate when this impasse will end or when it will be solved.
Okay. And then in this part of the world, well, in Nigeria here, there's an African saying, a popular African saying that's being used whenever we have issues like this. They say when two elephants are fighting, it's the grass that suffers. In this case, the two elephants being the lecturers and the government, and then the students are the ones suffering. Although the lecturers do say it's not a case of two elephants fighting. It's a case of, like one of the lecturers I spoke with said, he says it's a monster, it's a leviathan that's in trying to impose certain things on the lecturers. But either ways, the students are suffering. In Zimbabwe, the case is a bit different here because it's the students themselves who are taking their grievances to the government and saying that we need things to change. The prices you are giving us are too high. Are they in any way not? Do you think they are or they are not in any way, considering the fact that they are spending more time than is expected in school, and that their own academics is suffering because of this protest?
May you come again?
So I'm saying that the students not considering the fact that their own education is suffering while they are protesting increase in the high or increase in their tuition fees.
Well, to start with, they're already suffering when they take the protest because one, you cannot afford to be in school. So you're already suffering because you're disadvantaged. If you cannot afford to be in school, if you have even paid your school fees, you're not allowed to be in school. So it's not an issue that these protests are actually prolonging their education or affecting their education. Rather, the fees hike is affecting their education because most of the students cannot afford those fees, cannot afford to pay those fees. So the protest is in a way demonstrating the grievances that students are facing, the socio-economic challenges that students are facing from all walks of life.
Okay.
Marshall, just as Ben said earlier, said that he doesn't know if there might be light at the end of the tunnel. And for a country who is still dealing with a lot of epileptic power supply, Zimbabwe seem better. What is the mood of the students in Nigeria here? I remember when I was affected, I stayed home for almost 7 to 8 months. Some were already even getting married. Some picking up other side also. Some saying they can't even go back to school and do their businesses. What's the mood like among students there? Are some already losing hope, or they're just using the time to relax, or saying, oh, it's an opportunity to just stay away from book for a while?
Well, some students are disgruntled in their numbers. Well, some others are actually finding solutions because most probably they are coming from different backgrounds, with their social stratification, their social standing. Some students, but the bulk of students are facing challenges. Some are actually hoping that there will be an immediate solution where government will actually listen to their grievances and the fees hike will be dropped. And another factor is that when you're looking at the Zimbabwean context, you also have to take into cognizance the economic factor that is there, which is that our currency is currently volatile at the current moment. Maybe sometimes they are hoping that the currency will lose value so that fees becomes cheaper. If you have relatives that are in the diaspora, if they were to send you money, you know that the fees is no longer as much as it was when it was introduced. Well, then there are other students that actually depend on or who have their parents that actually depend on the local salary. So if it is eroded, that is another challenge for them. So there are a lot of dynamics that come into play concerning if there is if there is light at the end of the tunnel at the end of the day. But we are hoping and we are optimistic that the government will take into cognizance the grievances of the students and something constructive will come out of it.
Aside the tuition fee, are there other factors that might be affecting? Like, there's a school of thought in Nigeria that say, okay, because of the private creation of private universities in Nigeria being owned by top guns, top politicians, of course, that is why there's no good investment in infrastructure and also quality of education in Nigeria. Are there other factors like that affecting education in Zimbabwe?
Well, there are political factors, of course, because in Zimbabwe, politics is very polarized. I don't want to lie. Unions have different political affiliations or alignments. So in a way, when a union from a different political affiliation raises genuine grievances, you say that they are demonized as people that want to instill regime change, or people that are actually of the state that are just supporting the state. So there are actually different dynamics when it comes to play. Yeah, our country is politically polarized. So yes, there are different political vices. There are different political inclinations that actually influence. But at the end of the day, there are genuine grievances that are there that are actually affecting the students when it comes to the fees hike.
Okay, and finally, before we let you go, Marshall, do you think the introduction of online learning could make education cheaper and thus, reduce the stress on the students' pockets or on their parents' pockets, depending on who's paying the fees? We know that if anything, we learned that online learning, online working, remote working, remote schooling is actually a thing that is a thing that can work almost everywhere and anywhere right now. You think if education also kind of towed that line or that direction, it could reduce the cost of education in Zimbabwe and maybe make things a bit cheaper and better for the students?
Well, I don't think it would make the situation better. It actually exacerbates the crisis. Why? Because in Zimbabwe, data is very expensive.
Yeah. Oh.
Right. Data is very expensive. A lot of people don't have access to Wi-Fi, and a lot of people, most of the people's population, come from the rural areas. A lot of students actually may not have smartphones, may not have data. So if of course these other institutions have actually lobbied local service providers to provide e-learning discounts for them to have data where they can have cheap e-learning for them to actually access e-learning services. But that route is actually closing the gap on other students that may not have smartphones, that may not have gadgets, that actually have access to Wi-Fi. So in a way, it widens the gap between the rich and poor. So I won't advise that it's a sustainable route at the current moment because of the gap between the rich and poor.
All right. Thank you so much, Marshall Bwanya. Thank you for joining us on the show and on this topic. And we clearly do hope that in both countries, education will be back on its wheels and students can go back to learning in the classrooms eventually.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Marshall.
All right. Well, sadly, certain things that he mentioned are also similar here.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Yeah, talking about, I remember during the pandemic, or when we were just coming out of the lockdown and students were allowed to go back to the classrooms. But just before then, when online learning became a thing, even in Nigeria here, there were those students who I spoke to and also said that it might be a challenge because not all of them can equally afford data to, study online.
Yeah, then we'll consider the gadgets to be used. We'll consider network. We'll consider the area they are. So many things are going to be put into consideration if we want to switch to online. So I feel it could just be like something we could be working on the sideline, but our education system should still be worked on primarily.
Definitely.
And recently, the Minister of Education in Nigeria resigned.
Oh yes, resigned his own position. Chasing his political aspirations.
So this is what we are saying, and there's still a space of how many months before the next general election?
Almost about a year.
It means the agreement or whatever it is they might be having, conversation they are having with ASU currently It's a stalemate. Because who are you going to be talking to? Who is representing the government? So it will just be back and forth. Who knows how long the students might still be at home for?
It is quite funny. It is quite funny. But we do hope that everything is sorted on time. Hopefully, even before the election.
Hopefully, before people start getting married and giving birth to children.
How come you didn't get married during your own time?
Don't let's talk about that now.
All right, now we'll be going on a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be moving towards Somalia. We're talking about an explosion that rocked Mogadishu, leaving a certain number of soldiers injured. When we come back, that will be our next topic on Report Desk Africa. Do stay with us.
Welcome back. It's still RDA, where we bring you the hottest and the trendiest story across Africa. Now, our second story takes us to the eastern part of the continent, where an explosion rocked Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, injuring an unspecified number of soldiers. Multiple reports say a suicide bomber targeted vehicles at a checkpoint on the route leading to one of the country's international airports. Now, this attack has caused several casualties and was carried out as claimed by the group Al-Shabaab, a terrorist group known to have disturbed the peace and security of this region. And before I bring in the person who will be joining us to talk about this, Ben, this is not the first time we've been hearing about Al-Shabaab.
Of course,
okay,
of course.
They've been around for a while and disturbing a lot of activities. I remember there was a report I did where they disrupted a school or university they went in, blew up the university. Even years after, they're still trying to recover. And this has been going on for years. And this case of security is not just there. It's almost everywhere across Africa. What are your thoughts about this security
As a matter of
challenge?
fact, I think it's gone beyond Africa for now. We have terrorist organizations almost all across the world, if not all across the world. It's now, as some have called it, is the modern warfare that the world or that the globe has now had to battle with. We have our own, we are bedeviled by our own here in Nigeria, talking about Boko Haram up north, which has also spread to other parts of the Sahel. There's Al-Shabaab in the east, and other parts of Africa basically. And then, of course, we have in other regions of the world where they are struggling with their own, either from external forces or from within, the country. Countries as peaceful as New Zealand have had certain issues, and the first thing they want to check, is this an attack by a terrorist organization or not? So it's the modern warfare that the entire world is bedeviled by, and it's something that it doesn't seem like it's going away soon, but most governments will have to find a way to curb it to the barest minimum, just to ensure that the citizens of the country don't get hurt so much. But sadly, in Africa, on the continent here, we really, really are affected by terrorist organizations.
And what is worrisome is the fact that they say that there's some political backings to this stuff. So it could be a political movement trying to work against an opposition party, probably the ruling party. And till now, nothing has been done. And it's becoming a very big issue because they're getting connected every day. People are dying, scores of lives are going. Well, we'll be discussing more. We'll be joined by our new Central East African correspondent, Abdinol Nur. Abdinol, you're welcome on the program.
Very good evening to you, and it's a pleasure to have you once again in the Report Desk Africa.
Thank you for joining us. Now, I'll just go straight to the meat of the issue. And Al-Shabaab militants in Somalia seem to be getting bolder, and of course, we can't rule that out because when there's no punishment or when there's no reprisal attacks to their attacks, which has increased, now they're now using suicide bombers. Now, what do you think is responsible for this numerous attack by terrorist group, especially in Somalia?
A very well put question there. And of course, we've had a mixture of both security experts operating in Somalia from various security agencies, including those training Somali security forces in terms of enhancing security in the country. The Al-Shabaab group has really been changing their techniques and the ways of executing in attacks as it continues to lose ground in most of its previous strongholds within and outside the capital Mogadishu and other regions, the federal member states. And of course, the changing methodology of executing attacks, an example being the attack yesterday being a suicide attack, has indeed been, these changing methods of targeting different people and using assassination is indeed something that has been the trend of recent months.
You mentioned something about changing tactics, and this obviously means that the soldiers are doing something right for them to be changing tactics, because there must have been a way it's been done before, and which posed the question or discussion about, are the soldiers doing enough? Do you think there's enough intel about these people? Do you think they have the resources to actually tackle this terrorist group?
Well, in the past, especially during the holy month of Ramadan and during the periods, especially the last year, which is usually the year when the country holds its election and a period of transition, the country used to register and witness massive number of attacks. And this hasn't been the case this year, because there has been a huge reduction in the number of both the attacks and the casualties from this attack. And this has been attributed to mainly by the increased, patrols and operations within and outskirts of the capital, Mogadishu. And of course, we've also had multi-agency partnership between both the Somali National Army, we have the Somali Security Forces, we have the ATMIS, and we also have, support from experts who have really been providing training, especially for both the regional and the federal security institutions. And unfortunately, the casualties this year, and of course, the last few months have mostly been journalists, and it's not known why. But of course, we had the country lose one of its famous anti-terrorism and anti-radicalization journalist and producer from the Somali National Television who lost his life. We've had the current, even the government spokesperson also survived an assassination attempt through a suicide bomber. And there are many cases, but there has been huge decline in those attacks this year, indicating that there has been some heightened measures.
That's pretty sad to note. I know just recently we celebrated International Day for Press Freedom, I believe it was, yes. And attacks on journalists is something that definitely has been frowned upon by all governments around the world and by the United Nations organization as well. So to hear about this, it really, really saddens the heart. It's a dent on the profession. But still speaking about journalism, sometime early this year, I think it was around March, there were targets on the elections at the regional presidential palace, killing about 8 persons and leaving about 100 dead. Does this also seem like a target on elections, trying to see if the Al-Shabaab group is trying to ensure that elections do not hold, or trying to destabilize the government? Do you think the government actually is being targeted here?
And having the election period being famous for witnessing people converging, meetings taking place, and according to findings and expert analysis, is that these groups target huge crowds of people, because the source of satisfaction usually comes when the figures or the toll is very high. And this period during the elections actually became one of the targets. However, due to increased amounts or increased measures to both, those who are the voters, the elders, and the candidates themselves, the group actually had a lot of rough time trying to penetrate. And unfortunately, we had the Hirshabelle state, where we had the country lose a famous, prominent female lawmaker, and other people, and which was actually a very sad loss. But at the same time, this indicates that a reduction in previously we used to have actually this happening across all the member states, but this time round, especially around this period of elections, we have seen the country experiencing improved security measures. And yesterday's attack, actually, I forgot to mention earlier on, and before I forget about it, is that the police spokesperson Abdul Fattah Adan Hassan actually said that it was actually the suicide targeting Mr. General Garabe, who is one of the senior members of the Somali National Army. And he survived the attempt because his car was spotted near the area, and he was a target of that explosion, which led to the loss of 3 lives. So this is indeed something that has actually given some hope in Somalis in terms of the return of stability in the country.
Speaking of stability, now elections have been postponed for almost a year. And just as you said, most of this attack comes up maybe during election, during that time. Would it be safe to say there might be some sort of political undertone to these attacks?
We had Ambassador Francisco Madeira, who was the AU's former Somalia representatives, and of course he had said that whereas he hasn't highlighted that politics was obviously involved, but he spoke about the politicization of such attacks when the casualty is a prominent name, and the double standard when the casualty involves the ordinary people, like we've seen in Hirshabelle, where dozens of people lost their lives and they didn't make the headlines. But at the same time, we had prominent names, attracting criticism towards the government. But the other issue is that politicians themselves have been attacked during this period. And we had the National Intelligence Security Agency, famously known as NISA, even putting out a public notice, which actually became a talking point in the entire country, where it stated a man by the name Mahir was planning to, was posing a threat to the lives of the president and the prime minister. So, which was indeed something that shocked the nation. So, a lot of things, especially Somalia's recovery efforts and plans and successes. And these challenges keep on dragging along with every step it makes on the way. But the country believes there is light, and there could be light at the end of the tunnel.
We keep getting familiar with this.
There
could be
light at the end of the tunnel, and we definitely do hope that that we get to see that light. Sadly, before we let you go, Abdinor, as we mentioned earlier, insecurity sadly has become a national issue. It's become a global issue, as a matter of fact, not just a continental issue. In some parts of the world, like in Nigeria here, the government also has implored that the people themselves see what they can do to help the insecurity challenges. In some places, there are micro security groups where the government or the police or the security operatives employ the services of the locals within the area to see how they can possibly identify some of these possible threats or these persons who may pose as threats, such that they can give forehand information. Is there anything like that happening in Somalia? I understand that at some point people actually get scared, like in northern Nigeria, people got scared to talk, people got scared to even do anything that may make them targets of these terrorist groups. But is there any arrangement like that in Somalia where the people themselves are also partakers in the security operatives or the security apparatus, should I say, of the state?
Yeah, I think there is such efforts, and of course we had, especially during these 4 or 5 years under President Farmajo, we've had the security agencies actually extending amnesty to members of Al-Shabaab and other armed groups and militant groups in the country. And we actually have seen cases where former group members actually coming forward and surrendering to government forces, especially during operations in the federal member states and outskirts of the capital, Mogadishu. We also had President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo in his campaign address in the 2017 during his elections campaign. For the first time, he mentioned that he will be offering monetary rewards for people with information leading to the arrest or stop of terrorism attacks in the country. The challenge has not actually been about sharing information. The challenge has been, it's very hard indeed to tell, and especially to guarantee the safety of the ordinary people, because this is a community using the same language, observing the same faith, and living together, people knowing each other. We have the clanism element involved in it. So the government has actually put more focus on the amnesty, surrendering, and extending the efforts using the information shared or received from those known as returnees, or those who have surrendered from such groups. And in the future, once the country stabilizes and receives the number of supports and security, supports both monetary and the arms embargo, I think it might be at a capacity to both guarantee those who share information their safety and strengthen the war against terrorism.
Just in your final words, Abdinol, let me just get your insight on this. Now, we know that over the years, this Al-Shabaab has been disturbing Somalia. Is there anything in particular they have requested for? Is there anything in particular they are requesting for?
It has actually been a challenge not only to the government but all those stakeholders involved in the war on terrorism, because there has been a few months ago and several years we've seen business people in Somalia complaining about these groups collecting taxes. And even saying some of them provide security services, some of them, are very strong and very well established institutions. So the challenge has been, what exactly does this group want, and what exactly is in the interest of these groups? But it remains a puzzle that is yet to be resolved, and the government has seen that. According to the government, both addresses from the security agencies, they feel that the only way to improve security is actually to take the battle to the doorfront of these groups, and not try and find out. Even though there are some politicians calling for negotiations with these groups, calling for ceasefire, calling for agreements, but the government has not yet given attention to that, and it has prioritized strengthening and safeguarding the security of its citizens and its borders.
Okay, thank you so much, Abdinor. Thank you all, as always, for shedding more light on different topics. And we do hope that sooner than later, like you said, we clearly would have some light at the tunnel, and issues concerning terrorism will be a thing of the past, not just in Somalia, but in the entire African continent as a whole.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right. So yes, insecurity, not just in Somalia, not just in East Africa or West Africa. It's like I said, it's a continental issue, and in fact, it has become a global issue. We do hope that the governments around the world will seek and will be able to get a lasting solution.
To think that, just as Abdinol said, to think that when every government is coming at the start of their administration, it's part of their manifesto. They get to say, we are going to curb insecurity, we'll work on insecurity. And it's like these people are gaining ground by the day, getting bolder, just like an hydra head, developing new ways to constitute and to dissipate people. I was reading recently the tally of internally displaced persons across Africa alone. It's in thousands.
It is in hundreds of thousands, as a matter of fact. It clearly is something to worry about. Well, we do hope that, like I said earlier, things will get better.
Hopefully. Don't go anywhere. We'll be looking into our crystal ball as we'll be telling you what should be coming up in the coming week.
And if you're just joining us, well, you have missed a lot. This is the segment where we call it forecast. It's where we look into our crystal ball. Exactly, and trying to find out.
Look into the future.
Into the future.
What is going on.
What may happen in the future. We're not there yet, but we're looking
at it.
Now, usually, Nee used to be the one giving us...
right, but I'm on this seat right now.
On this seat right now. So Nee, who is taking your seat?
Adeshewa. No, let them see if I don't.
All right, so we have a debutant on the show, Adeshewa Odutuga, I believe. Shewa, it's good to have you.
Hi, Shewa.
It's good to see you too. Well, it's Odushoga.
Odushoga. I apologize.
Hi,
I got the name before you came on, and then immediately you came on, I missed your name again. I'm so sorry. Odushoga. So, Shewa, look into that ball and tell us, what should we be expecting on the continent next week? What kind of stories do you think we'll be following up on?
All right. To top in the list of the forecast for the week, we have UK. The asylum seekers in the UK are trying to hide from being sent to Rwanda. Now, people who cross into the UK illegally will be transferred to Rwanda, where their papers will be processed according to the partnership signed between Rwanda and the UK last month. Now, the British Red Cross and the Refugee Council accused the UK government of a breach of the duty of care, as some asylum seekers have declined to seek medical and mental health care. As a matter of fact, some of the asylum seekers are seen to worry, and now they are starting to cause self-harm to themselves. Some are trying to run away, and some are even going to the extent of committing suicide. Now, a joint report by the agencies warned that existing problems with the asylum system were getting worse because of the new Rwandan policies. And I share their grief, if you ask me, because it's okay for you to probably leave, try to run away from the African country because of its peculiar problems, and then you're trying to go to the UK because you are probably seeking
really
a safe space, and then someone is telling you to go back to Rwanda to process you. I mean, if Rwanda was good, I wouldn't go to the UK to seek asylum.
Exactly, it completely defeats the aim of seeking asylum in the first place, you know.
Right? I could have just
so
stayed
it's
in my
okay,
own country.
but it is worrisome to see that some of the asylum seekers are now starting to, commit suicide or even going as far as causing self-harm.
Kind of affect their mental health.
Anyway,
we can't blame them.
Moving on now, you see Guinea is announces a 3-year transition to civilian rule. Now, the 36-month transition is slightly shorter than the 39 months which military junta leader Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya had announced. Now, although many Guineans initially welcomed the coup, there is a growing discontent against the junta in the nation of 13 million people. Now, you agree with me that the coup started when the president announced that introduced new constitution into the country. And unfortunately, we also see that the coup also saw ECOWAS reducing the rank of the Guinea in 2020. But, well, as there's a light good news, although ECOWAS had demanded that the coup ends in 6 months, but they're saying that it's going to take a 3-year transition.
At
So
least
we'll see how
there's a
that
transition now in
Yeah,
progress.
they
Because
are
before
agreeing.
they didn't, they were not having that conversation
about
at
the
all.
transition.
But
True.
now, hopefully,
So it's good news that they're even suggesting a transition.
Exactly,
so,
and then they've reduced the time from 39 months to 36 months.
So
Who knows?
it's-
Maybe
it's-
next month, another 3 months.
3 months
will be
will
out
be
of
up.
it. So
Who
let's
knows?
keep cutting. Exactly, let's keep cutting it down.
Fingers crossed on that. So lastly, on the forecast for the week, Uganda government says that there is no fuel subsidy, and then the prime price remains high. And our household budgets and operating costs of businesses in Uganda are expected to remain high following the government's refusal to provide subsidy. Now, many had hoped President Yoweri Museveni would announce fuel cuts and other relief measures during the Labor Day celebrations, but unfortunately, the president used the occasion to rally Ugandans to substitute imports with locally produced goods to edge against imported inflation. And this is funny because it's similarly different strokes for different folks, as they say. While the Nigerian government is looking at removing subsidies because of the costs it is having on government spending, well, Ugandans also have to bear the brunt of the high cost of fuel, because if you honestly ask me, having to pay subsidies on fuel imports has its own effect on the government spending. And sadly, Ugandans, beg your pardon, will have to keep bearing the brunt, while Nigerians probably will still keep enjoying this fuel subsidy thing until the election period fades out.
I hope it's the right brunt.
Even though Nigerians are like you said, holding on, it's been made clear that eventually this removal of subsidy may still come to Nigeria. So I guess we have to brace ourselves for the impact if eventually it does come. But anyhow, thank you so much, Adeshewa. Odushoga.
That
I'm
was
not going to get it
really,
wrong. Yes,
exactly.
this was really good. And remember, Shewa, this is the first time you're on the show, so drinks are on you after the show this evening. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Shara.
All right, Nii, so far so good. That's the end of the show today.
Yeah, it's been an awesome one.
Yes,
Do not worry if your country wasn't mentioned today. Don't worry. That is why we are here. Report Desk Africa will bring you the hottest and trendy story across Africa, and it could just be your country next, where we get to talk about things affecting you and coming up with solutions and preparing solutions to them. It's good to have you on the show again
Very
today.
good to have you on the show. My name is Bernard Akidi. Thank you for being with us. Looking forward to see you again same time next week on the same station.
Bye.